Today, we are going to rip these sleeves off this blazer and make it into a vest. Let's get started. First thing you're going to want to do is to find a blazer, either one that you think it needs a little upcycling or just one that you don't really like and it needs something, changed to it. So I picked this one, not my favorite. Something's missing. So we're gonna make the sleeve go missing. We're gonna start though by literally seam ripping and taking it completely off so we can take a look at the inside and go from there. Great. So we're literally just gonna go all the way around, rip it, kind of pull it. There may be some double stitching lines, so you might have to go over the same area twice. We just want to make sure everything there gets separated. And you can even, if it will rip like this, that is great. That means I don't have to take so much time going thread by thread. And don't worry about it ruining the fabric because most threads actually will do this if you pull hard enough. But you might have to take a few cuts occasionally. Wow, that was easier than I thought. Next, we'll actually do the lining. If you can see here, we've got, it looks like a chain stitch. So potentially, if we rip a few of these, we might actually be able to get it to pull. And that would be nice so we don't rip the lining since that's a more sensitive fabric. If you have any of the old, like an older style jacket, the thread could be pretty worn. So it might actually, even the lining, rip pretty easily. Sometimes you just have to have the right momentum and it'll come off. Okay, well, we've got our missing arm, so that's wonderful. We are going to want to keep the shoulder pad. At this point, you could take it out and just test it and just see if you like the look or not. I'm a big fan of the shoulder pad, so I'm going to do my best to keep it in while we close that up. So here we're just looking at how it can be put back together. Depending on your suit jacket, it may look a little different than this, but essentially what we want to do is fold over that seam allowance, sandwiching it like that all the way around so that it will tuck in and look really seamless and nice. If we need to, that curve, we'll come back and cut as we need. It will get narrower in the shoulder, unfortunately. So because of that, we will have to cut down that padding there for it to fit. So I think I'll actually start with that by flipping that around and marking about 1/2 inch so we know how much to cut. We're just doing 1/2 inch since that seam allowance is about that much. That way it fits back in perfectly. And now you're just going to want to get some nice big scissors to cut that out. So now I'm kind of pushing it back in. You can see where it's sewn in there, just pulling it, making sure that that will fold over nicely. So that will give us that nice little bump on our shoulder. Great, so the next thing we're gonna do is actually open up the vent down here, right through there, so we can access everything through the inside and sew inside out. This vent here is usually top stitched. I don't know why there is a bad pleat. I got this thrifting, so this has to be manufacturer error. I don't know. But we'll fix that now that we see it. We're gonna open this up and then we'll just top stitch it closed because that vent there will hide that for us. So we're gonna reach into the vent all the way up to the under seam, the underarm seam, and I'm just gonna tuck both these edges inside so then I can pull them out the correct way so I know which direction to pin them. So before I lose that, I'm just going to put a pin right there. And then I would match each seam of the lining to the outer. And you're really going to have to kind of pull it out around because we have that narrow opening that it has to go through. You might have to shake it, sometimes that helps. And we're just going to ignore the padding there for now. We'll come back to that later. All right, and we will now go over to the machine to sew. Okay, we are over here at the machine ready to sew. I've got my best matching color to this jacket, and I think we're just going to start on one of these seams. And we're just going to keep the same seam allowance it looks like they had, which is that half all the way around. And I'm actually going to make my thread length a little long just in case I mess up and we need to take it back out. Okay. Since we're going in a circle, don't have to backstitch at the start. That never a necessity. And if the lining is kind of bunching up with you here, just kind stretch. And you are going to want to sew kind of like in this circle, in the shape that it already is. That way it sits nicer. Okay, I feel the collar sitting right there, so we're just going to want to push that back inside. So now, since that's out of the way, we'll move forward. Just adjusting as we go. Since lining can move around a lot, I don't think it's going to be a big deal because there's always ease in there. So if you have to push it forward a little bit more for it to fit, that will be fine. Good thing I've got my Teflon foot on because this is really slippery actually. Honestly, the more pins you put in, it might be a little bit easier. That's okay, we're near our end. Great, and then I finally backstitch. All right, we're gonna go back over to the table and look at everything from the right side out. I'm over at the iron now, and I'm just going to use my right hand to push through while I pull with my left the fabric away. And there it is now inside out. And you're gonna notice that the lining is kind of puckering and it might be really tight. So what we're gonna do is kind of just press it, and then we're gonna go back to the sewing machine to understitch it. Okay. So I'm just gonna flatten that best I can and just press my edge flat. And you're gonna wanna do small sections so you can go around that curve more easily. as it wants to sit. Again, the padding, if it's still attached inside, just leave it there for now. It won't be in the way. Okay, one last press. Okay. And now, after we've pressed that and it's as flat as we can get it, we're going to go back to the machine and just understitch, which is going to be sewing that lining layer to the inside seam allowance. This part is going to be a little bit tricky because we have this small opening to go ahead and sew all of that. If you need to, I would honestly just make that hole bigger if it helps, because this is going to be a really tight squeeze. You see this space here? We're going to sew along this edge, but on the top. So that's going to be flat against the machine. And what I like to do is check and feel with my fingers to make sure I'm on the edge. And then underneath, you see there's the opening, and that is where I'm sewing here. So I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm just sewing on that very edge here. About 1/8 of an inch is what we're going to prefer here. And as you can see, I'm kind of pulling this up as I flatten that out. And then we're going to take it in small sections all the way around. It's okay to go slow here because we don't want to have to repeat this. This is a difficult part in the sewing process. And if you need to, you can lift the presser foot, kind of move the lining away so it's not gathering. I like to pull everything kind of taut. That way there's no chance of me accidentally sewing through multiple layers than I need to. Like that one kind of folding in on itself. I'm just pulling it apart. So as I just feel underneath, because it is hard to look, there's that 1/4 of an inch, I'm sorry, 1/2 inch seam allowance about right here, and I'm just folding it this way into the lining underneath. Because right here it's kind of flipping out to the other side, which we don't want. Here, I'm having difficulty actually to get around, so I'm actually going to cut there, pull that out, see where I have left. Let me see, we went all the way, a little bit more than halfway, and I'm going to start here and then work myself to the end. So I'm just going to repeat that by going up through, finding the place I stopped, and then putting that back down in that opening. There we go. Now I'm going to backstitch where I stopped, and that should make it a little bit easier. And we're done. Okay, we are now back at the table after we just understitched, and we are ready to find that padding. Mine is stuck back here. So I'm just going to reach in and this you are going to have to kind of do blind. It's easier to set it, but the thickest part should sit in about the middle. And it's kind of shaped like a horseshoe. So the rounder edge will be here, and then the thicker part is going to sit along this edge. So you just are going to want to feel it to make sure it sits right. I can find my way back. All I'm doing now is just putting a pin in it. And then I like to, that one's dull. Maybe that one is too. Okay, just one pin is fine. We are going to just put a little tack through the seams. That way, when we're on the inside, it doesn't move, and then we'll sew it onto the seam allowance that we left on the inside there. So I've got my thread and needle here, and we're just going to basically thread it through the top and the lining. And you can tack it any which way. Just make sure to do some wide stitches so it can be easily taken out after we've sewn it. All right, and we'll just leave a long tail on the inside. Don't worry about tying it off. And now we will go back to the sewing machine and flip it inside out. So once again, we're going to reach through, and this time we're going to make sure we grab the padding and pull that out. And so you can see where we tacked it. Now what we'll do is there's our seam allowance that we just understitched, and we're going to actually just sew that along the edge. And we can actually go ahead and cut that out since we know where it sits, or pull it. It makes it a lot easier. So I'll line that up, my center point to that shoulder seam. And then we're just going to sew on the very edge. You can pin this, but I find that it's just easier to move it as you sew. So we're just sewing on that very edge so it has a hold. Back stitch. And I do like to start in the middle, that way I can manipulate it as I need around the curve so it sits where I want. It's all twisted up. That is very normal. Again, it's because of that very narrow opening we have right there. So now I'll do the reverse of that. Okay, now that that is all secure, we can we are actually going to head over to the iron with some scissors to go ahead and cut this to release the tension that's under the arm. So now I'm looking at the seam allowance we just sewed, and I've got my scissors here, and I'm actually just going to clip into the fabric. That way, when we press it, it'll ease that tension and help the seam lay flatter. I'm going to cut around the whole entire area, but I'm going to actually leave the padding alone because we want that to stay highly structured there. And you can clip at an angle or straight, it doesn't really matter as long as you don't cut past your stitching line. And I wouldn't make the cuts too close together, maybe a ½ inch far apart at the smallest. And one last clip right at that edge. And we're good to flip it right side out. Just gonna shove all of that through. Okay, flip that right side out. Okay, and now we're going to press all of that flat. You are going to want to press a little hard there so it sits really nice and flat. Again, we're just going to take it in small sections so we can press around the curve evenly. All right, now that you've pressed it, it's time to go try it on. Here we are with the finished product. I love how it looks. I will say, keep in mind that the shoulder seams might narrow a little bit because we do have to tuck them in about that ½ inch to get them to lay right. But other than that, I think it looks amazing. That's all I have for you today. So if you want to like, subscribe, and leave a comment, tell me what you want to see next. Maybe we take the pants out of pants. Who knows? We could do anything these days. Thank you.